Hey guys, today I wanted to do another video on phonology and pronunciation, and in this video I'm going to talk about 4 features of the English language that you're going to need to learn if you're learning English and you want to learn how to pronounce it properly. And this is also 4 features that you're going to need to unlearn if you are an American speaker, native speaker of English, specifically American English. Some of these will apply to other, British or Australian dialects as well, but I know for sure all of these apply to American English. And if you're a native speaker of English, then you're going to need to learn how to forget these 4 features, and it's very difficult, actually, believe it or not, to undo some of the habits that you've spent years and years and years building up, and things that we just do naturally every time we open our mouths to speak. So in this video, I'm going to use a little bit of phonological jargon, just a tiny bit. But if you have no basis in phonology, you might also want to check out my Linguistics 101 phonology video, and I'll post it. I'll try to link to it up here if I remember, where I talk about phonemes and allophones and just give you a basic explanation of phonology. So the first feature of the English language that I want to talk about is that we have 2 L's. We have one phoneme that we sometimes colloquially call L, but there's 2 different pronunciations of it, and we call them the light L and the dark L. Now, you probably don't think about this if you're a native English speaker, but you do it every day without noticing. And if you're not a native English speaker, then this is something that you're going to want to learn to do in order to improve your pronunciation and sound more native-like. Now, the light L is formed with the tip of the tongue towards the front of the mouth. And this is the L that we have when it comes at the beginning of a syllable. So words like light, left, lewd. Anytime that an L would come at the beginning of a syllable, this is the L that we're pronouncing. And like I said, it's pronounced with the tip of the tongue forward in the mouth, up against your alveolar ridge. Oh, oh, oh. You can kind of see my tongue when I do that. Oh. Now we have another L in the English language called the dark L. And this is the L that comes at the end of syllables, like in the word well, or dull, or L, the letter L. What else is there? Anything that ends with L. Swell, right? This sound is pronounced with the tongue further back in the mouth, closer to the back of your throat. And you can kind of hear it. I don't know why, it just kind of makes sense for them to call it a dark L, because it just sounds a little darker. Oh, oh. And so if you listen to those 2 L's together, oh and oh, ul and ul. To a native English speaker, that just sounds like 2 ways of pronouncing the same letter, the same phoneme. But if you're coming from a different language backgrounds, those might actually be totally separate phonemes. Meaning that if you're a native English speaker, then you're going to want to learn whatever the L phoneme is in the language that you're learning. You're going to want to learn whether that's the light L or the dark L, and don't make the mistake of applying the rule that exists in the English language of your light L being at the beginning of the syllable, dark L at the end of the syllable. That probably doesn't apply in the language that you're learning. And if you are a non-native English speaker learning English, then you're going to want to learn to pronounce the light L at the beginning of syllables, whenever L comes at the beginning of a syllable, and your dark L at the end of the syllable. And it's kind of nice, actually, now that I think about it. Just the phrase light L has both of those. It has your light L at the beginning and your dark L at the end. So I guess that's probably an easy way of remembering it. So that's the first one. If you're learning English, you want to learn to keep your light L and dark L separately. And if you're learning a foreign language, but you're a native English speaker, then you want to learn to not apply the English rules to the foreign language that you're learning, because it doesn't necessarily hold true. In fact, it almost certainly does not hold true in the language that you're learning. The next feature of English that we're going to talk about is aspirated stops. Now, a stop sound is a consonant that where you build up the air pressure in your mouth. You have a little closure in your mouth, and you're building up air pressure, and then you open the closure to release the air. Which that's a very technical way of saying that your voiced or your voiceless stops in English are P, T, and K. P, T, K. Now, just like your L's, each one of these sounds has two variants, or we call them two allophones. Okay? When it comes at the beginning of the word, these sounds are going to be called aspirated stops. An aspiration just means there's a little puff of air that comes along with the sound, kind of like a little H. Okay? And you probably don't notice you do this, but I promise if you're a native speaker of English, at least American English, I promise you do it. And the way I like to explain this is using a little piece of paper. Okay? So when we have words that begin with a P, a T, or a K, then there's going to be a little puff of air that comes out of my mouth when I pronounce that letter, blowing the piece of paper. Okay, so like, for example, the word pit. You see how much that P, so it's the word P-I-T, and you can see how much that P at the beginning, there's a puff of air. You could just put your finger there and feel it. There's going to be a puff of air coming out of your mouth when you have a P at the beginning of a word. Now, if you put an S at the beginning of the word, so we have the word spit, the P is no longer at the beginning, so it's no longer aspirated. And the difference there is between P and B. Spit, if you put your hand there, you'll notice that when you say spit, there's not a big puff of air that comes out. But when you say pit, it's like you're doing a little extra H in there. And that's going to blow if you have a little piece of paper, that little H is going to blow your paper, or you'll feel it on your hands. But that only occurs when your P, the T, or the K takes place at the beginning of the word. When there's another letter in front of it, or when it's at the end of the word, we don't always do that. In fact, the rules get a little bit complicated, but you usually don't aspirate those. Meaning that we're going to have three pairs of sounds. Okay, we're going to have T and D, K and G, P and B. Now, if you are learning Korean or Thai or many other languages, each one of those sounds, that's actually 6 different sounds, right? In English, T and D are just basically 2 ways of saying the same thing. But in Korean or in Hindi, those they're very different sounds, and they can be used to form different words. So if you have the word pa and ba, that's not 2 ways of saying the same word. That's 2 different words that have 2 very different meanings. So if you're learning English, you're going to want to learn to aspirate your T's, your P's, and your K's when they come at the beginning of the word. So that's P, T, K. And when it comes in the middle of the word, or after an S, or at the end of the word, you're not going to want to aspirate them. So it's going to be more like D, G, B. And it even sounds, it's hard for me even to say that without having some letter, some vowel in front of those. Because it's just so natural for me as a native English speaker to say T, P, K. But the test is, if you can put an S in front of it, then it's going to be unaspirated. So it would be like sp, sk, st. I hope I'm making sense. If I'm leaving room for some confusion or you don't quite understand, please feel free to leave comments below. This video is just kind of coming off the top of my head as I was traveling through Portugal. But it's something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I just finally decided today is the day that I'm going to make this video. So anyways, that's the second thing. You want to learn to separate your aspirated stops from your unaspirated stops. And if you're a native speaker of English, for example, in Spanish or in French, they don't have aspirated stops, okay? So, for example, in the word perro, okay, dog, you're not going to say perro because that's using an aspirated stop, okay? And it's natural for us to do that because the P comes at the beginning of the word. So we want to say perro or película or para, right? You don't want to do that. You want to say perro, película, para. And that's not natural for us to do. But if you can learn to separate your aspirated P's from your unaspirated P's, and then only use the unaspirated P's when speaking in Spanish, even when it comes at the beginning of the word, you're going to sound more natural. Alright, number 3 is your diphthongs A and O. Now, a lot of times, English has a lot of vowels, okay? English has something like 12 to 14 vowels. And that's a lot, okay? Most languages have around 5, okay? A lot of languages have A, E, A, O, and U. Now, English vowels are very difficult. And especially our A and our O vowel, they're a little complicated because these are not just single sounds, okay? I'm going to go back to Spanish because that's the language that I use the most. In Spanish, they have 5 vowels. A, E, I, O, U. Okay? Now, as a native English speaker, you're going to be tempted to pronounce those vowels as A, E, I, O, U. Okay? But it's not A and O. It's E and O. Okay? Now, in English, we actually pronounce those as diphthongs. Okay? A diphthong is 2 different vowels that kind of meld together into one, but they still have 2 different component parts. And if you listen really closely when we say A, it starts off as an A and it ends closer to an E or an I sound. And it actually changes and morphs as you go through the vowel. Same with the O sound. We start off saying O, and then as it goes closer to the end, you're closer to oo, O, 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 right? So the negative word in Spanish and English is very similar, right? In English, it's no. In Spanish, it's no. And the temptation for someone who doesn't know much about phonology is to think that these words are just the same. They're just pronounced exactly the same, but they're not. The vowel is different. It's minor. It's a slight difference, but it's a difference, okay? So the English word no ends with your mouth is, your lips are going to be closer together, and your tongue is going to be a little bit higher. No. You're actually changing that vowel as you go through it. No. Right? In Spanish, it's not that way. It's just no. And most languages are going to make use of diphthongs, but they're not necessarily going to use diphthongs in the same way that English does. Okay? Most languages that you're learning, if you're a native English speaker learning a foreign language, they probably won't just have this O diphthong. Okay? They might make use of that diphthong, but you're also going to want to be able to pronounce the O, the plain O without the diphthong. Okay? And the same thing goes with A. You don't want to be always saying A because that's a very Englishy sounding word. What's a good example? Okay, the word se in Spanish, it's spelled S-E, okay? This is not pronounced the same word as the same way as the English word say, S-A-Y, okay? Say has a diphthong, and that's why we spell it with an A and a Y, because that vowel is changing as you go through the word say. In Spanish, it's not say, it's se. It's just one single vowel sound. Now, conversely, if you're a native Spanish speaker learning English, then your tendency might be to always pronounce these sounds as monophthongs, as a single unchanging vowel. And that's going to sound very unnatural to the ear of a native English speaker. So you don't want to say the Pledge of Allegiance. It's not say. I don't say words. I say words. You want that vowel sound to change as you go through it. And that applies to every time you have the A vowel or the O vowel in English. So you want to just be thinking about this and keeping this in your mind as you're pronouncing English words. So I hope by now you can kind of see that all of these different rules go both ways. If you're learning English, then you're going to want to learn to pronounce these things in the English way. And if you're a native speaker of English, then you're going to want to learn to undo these rules of English phonology that you don't even think about. Okay? You don't want to apply these English phonology rules to the language that you're learning. You want to try to use as close to the phonology as possible, as close to the phonology of the language that you're learning. So that's 3 things we have so far. Your dark L, light L, your aspirated stops, unaspirated stops, and your diphthongs A and O. The 4th thing I want to talk about is your flapped R's. And this one is pretty specific to North American English. I think maybe also Australian English does this. So if you're trying to learn English from America, Canada, or Australia, then you're going to want to learn to apply this rule. Britain, Ireland, I don't think they do this quite as much or at all. But what we do in English is when we have a T that comes between 2 vowels, the first of which is stressed, then we don't pronounce that T in the normal way. Okay? Whereas in England, they would maybe pronounce the word water. Right here I have a water bottle, right? And they actually pronounce that T in the middle of the word. We pronounce it too, but we pronounce it differently. Okay? We would say water, and a lot of people say it's like a D sound, kind of, and it's sort of. It's a little closer to a D sound than your normal T sound, but it's not quite a D either. We don't say water, okay? That sounds weird even to an American. We say water, and that sound that we have there, instead of the normal T sound, we call that a flap, because essentially what you're doing is you're taking the tip of your tongue and you're just flapping it against the roof of your mouth. And this is very similar to the way R's are pronounced in a lot of languages, like, for example, Spanish, or I think maybe sometimes in Portuguese or Italian. And now, again, the rule for this is when you have a T surrounded by 2 vowels, the first of which is stressed. So in the word water, because the stress falls on the first syllable, or on the first vowel, that's why the T in the middle is flapped. So take the word potato. Okay? In potato, the stress is on the middle syllable. So we have 2 T's in the word, right? In the word potato, the first syllable is unstressed, meaning that the T that follows the unstressed vowel is not going to be flapped. We pronounce that just like a normal T, just like they would in United Kingdom. potato, right? Then the second T in the word, we flap that here in America. We don't say potato, it's potato. I'm just reminding myself of Lord of the Rings all of a sudden. Potato, boil 'em, mash 'em, stick 'em in a stew. Anyways, so there's a reason that the two T's in potato are pronounced differently by Americans. It's because the first T follows an unstressed vowel. The second T follows a stressed vowel. Okay? Now, if you're an American, again, you're going to want to be careful about using this rule when you're learning foreign languages. For example, I'm trying to think of a word maybe in French, because I've used a lot of Spanish examples already. I'll just use a Spanish example. Okay, the word pata. Okay, there's a T following a stressed syllable, following a stressed vowel. Okay, the T in pata is in between a stressed A first and then an unstressed A second. So this is the perfect environment where an American would want to flap that T and say para instead of pata, right? The problem with that is that para in Spanish is a different word, okay? You've actually changed the meaning of the word now just because you've changed the pronunciation of that T. And it's not the way that a native Spanish speaker would pronounce the T in the word pata, meaning paw or the foot of an animal. If you say para instead of pata, you've now changed it to the word for, like for you, or the preposition for. I think that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. It's gone way longer than I planned, and I'm kind of rambling because I'm just shooting off the hip here. But the four things that I wanted to talk about, they're important to know whether you're American learning a foreign language or whether you're a foreigner learning English. Hopefully I was clear enough. If you have any questions about any of the things that I said, please feel free to leave me a comment below. And that's it. That's all I have to say for this video. I am currently in Portugal right now, on my way to France, where I'm going to be studying for a month. So I'm going to keep making videos while I'm in France. I haven't been really consistent about making videos the last month or so because of my travels, but I'll be a little bit more consistent while I'm in France. So if you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can do so by clicking on the Patreon logo down here. And that's it. That's all I have to say. Thanks for watching my video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.